The Wallace downtown area is somewhat unique in that most all the buildings were built around the same time period between 1890 and 1900 after a fire burned down the original structures in 1890. But not all the buildings at that time were replaced with brick and mortar. Due to economics, time, or the immediate need, some chose to rebuild once again using wood. But over time, those wood frame buildings eventually were replaced with brick structures. Business needs, disrepair, or disasters such as fire brought about the need for those to be replaced and constructed using materials that met the new downtown building codes. A good example of that is the Tabor building that burnt to the ground in 1933 and was rebuilt using brick. So some of our downtown area buildings, though mostly constructed in the 1890s, contain styles from buildings used from 1890 through the 1930s. In a few square blocks, one can see anything from Queen Anne style to neoclassic to Art Deco and others. One of those buildings, built a bit later than the others in the immediate area, is the Masonic Temple building located at 605 Bank Street. This was the third building in Wallace to house the Masonic Lodge since its charter in 1892. And unlike the other Masonic temples located in Wallace before this one, this entire building had been designed from the beginning with the knowledge that a Masonic temple would occupy the top floor. The Freemasons had been located in two different buildings before this one. The first location was the upstairs of the Allback building, better known as the Wallace Free Press building, located at 520 Bank Street, just a half block to the west. In 1896, the temple was moved to the top of the Wallace Opera House at the intersection of 6th and Hotel Street. The Opera House burned to the ground in 1915, and in 1916 construction began on the current building located on Bank. The building is a two-story brick structure with a basement. It has a terracotta on the outside front with granite trim, and it was designed by J.I. Hubble from Spokane. Hubble had designed many commercial buildings and several Masonic temples around the inland Northwest, so the upper floor space was laid out with their needs in mind. In the late 1800s through the first part of the 1900s, fraternal groups such as the Freemasons played a major part in the development of frontier and mining towns that sprang up throughout the western United States. Our nation was different back then. There were no government-structured programs that provided relief, charity, or assistance. The nation was in a time of struggle, and though the African Americans had been declared free men, race tensions was still high, and not only the color of a person's skin, but also the nation they were from played a part in how they were treated. The women's suffrage movement was in full swing, bringing attention to the lack of rights given to women and their treatment by society, especially in small mining towns. And there was also the labor struggle between the working man and the rich and powerful men of business of the day. Mining and frontier towns often lacked strong law enforcement. Drinking, gambling, prostitution, and wholesale violence was often the norm. Often the only charity, relief, and moral structure in these camps were those provided by an organized religious group. Yet sometimes this caused problems, especially for those who didn't practice that prescribed religion. Yet many of the men that came into these camps had moral and spiritual backgrounds. They were businessmen and civic-minded people. So groups like the Freemason provided them with an organization that could provide a social foundation and, at least in theory, give the men of the community a moral compass to better their lives. Whether or not they actually lived what the group practiced is sometimes a different story. You would be hard-pressed to look back on any of these towns' history and not find that their founding leaders had affiliation with the Freemasons. Many of the fathers of the Silver Valley were Freemasons. Some of those in Wallace included Adam Albach, a newspaper man who owned papers in Murray, Wardner, Mullen, Burke, and Wallace. He was a mine owner. He owned interest in several other mines. He had his own mill on Buckeye Mine near Dream Gulch in Murray. He was the owner of Murray's water plant. He served a term as an Idaho state legislator. He was outspoken and had an opinion about everything, and he wasn't afraid to take on the rich and powerful. In his paper, he was often an open supporter of the miners' unions. Weldon Hayburn was also a member of the Wallace Masonic Lodge. He had come to Murray in 1884 during the gold rush and was a practicing lawyer in Wallace. He was a member of the committee who framed the Idaho State Constitution and was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1903. And of course, there was Herman Rossi. He was a four-time mayor of Wallace, an Idaho state representative, chairman of the Board of Education, a lieutenant colonel in the Idaho National Guard. He's probably best known as an insurance executive. The Rossi Insurance Building still exists today. He was also a well-known boxer in his day, with many bouts being fought right here in Wallace at the Eagles Building and Howarth Hall, located above the Idaho Free Press Building. Rossi even shot a man. He was later found not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. He did, however, serve time behind bars when he was found guilty of violating the Volstead Act during Prohibition. The charges against him and others included bribery of a city official, transporting illegal alcohol, sex trafficking, and encouraging illegal prostitution. One of the things I found interesting about the Masonic Lodge here in Wallace was the diversity. When you consider the political and social battles that were going on between 1892 and 1900 with the mining wars, many of the mine owners and members of the Mine Owners Association were Masons, and yet there were also some mining union officials, plus business owners like Adam Albach, for example, who were supportive of the mining union. They must have had some interesting fellowship times after their meetings. As was the case with most lodges, the downstairs was to be leased out to another business or retail outlet. Before the building was even completed, it had been chosen to be the new home of the J.C. Penney Company. Penney's already had an outlet in Wallace with one of its Golden Rule stores located in the Bernard Building on Cedar Street, and they also had one in Kellogg. The partnership that made up the Golden Rule stores had dissolved, and the current owner, James Cash Penney, had started adding his name to the outlet stores. By the time the new Penney store opened in 1917, the name Golden Rule had been dropped altogether. Penney's had even started closing some stores in different areas because of the conflicts Mr. Penney had concerning moral issues in particular towns and cities. The new store here in Wallace became one of the 175 retail stores that James Cash Penney himself chose to keep open. He had become a born-again Christian as well as a 33rd degree Mason. It was no coincidence that the retail floor of the Masonic Temple was chosen by Penney to move his store into. J.C. Penney's, though it had gone through changes, stayed in operation here in Wallace until the mid-1980s. Since 1917, the interior of both Penney's and the Masonic Hall upstairs had gone through some renovations. In the main hall upstairs, the hanging ceiling had been added to cover the original skylight. The skylight is still there, and told that it's in perfect condition, and perhaps one day those tiles will be removed. After Penney's closed, the building sat vacant for some time. It once housed a manufacturing company called Batwave that made snow skiing equipment like gloves and such, and it later became home to an antique store known as the Cobblestone. Their sign still hangs out front. Today, it's also an antique store owned and operated by Mark Davis. Mark has been dealing in antiques in Wallace for about the past 9 years. And though cobblestone may not be its official name anymore, that is what people call it simply because that's what the sign out front says. Mark, who has a bit of sense of humor, sometimes likes to greet people when they walk in the door with a, "Hello, welcome to J.C. Penney's." Most smile and get the joke, but sometimes they do turn around and walk out thinking they're in the wrong place. I tend to think of this place not so much as an antique store, but rather a museum with price tags. Like some of the other stores in the area, Mark has several things that are historic relics from our local area, as well as Spokane, Montana. And there's just too many items to cover, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to focus in on a couple of my favorites. So let's take a quick look at J.C. Penney's, Mark Davis style. Here you can find a saddle that belonged to Lewis Brooks. In 1943, Brooks won the United States Rodeo Championship held at Madison Square Garden in New York. And he's also been inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame. Above the front entrance on the inside, there's a large welcome banner strung across the doors. This is one of the original banners that hung in Wallace when President Theodore Roosevelt visited in 1903. And though there were several of these made and hung around the town, to the best of anyone's knowledge, this is the only one that still exists. There is an original lighted sign from the Spokane Club, and though I'm not sure what year this particular sign is from, the Spokane Club is world-renowned and was formally dedicated in 1903 by President Theodore Roosevelt during the same trip that brought him to Wallace. A nice wardrobe closet that came from the Providence Hospital that was located here. Built in 1891, the hospital was closed in the late 1960s and then torn down. Providence was also where Hollywood icon actress Lana Turner was born. You can find railroad mining items, a New York militia helmet, advertisement signs of all descriptions and sizes cover the walls, and aside from a few personal nightmares, I have not run across too many huge mechanical clowns. Next to it sits an original wooden ride cart from the world-famous Coney Island. He has a mechanical pig ride. Yeah, that's what I said. A mechanical pig ride. And 3 large advertisement displays of the 3 little pigs. Here you can purchase a 1920s pinball machine. There's gas pumps, furniture, taxidermy, 1 of this, 3 of that, 2 of those, pictures, toys, souvenirs, knicks, knacks. It's all here, and it's all for sale. If you find yourself in the downtown area of Wallace, be sure to stop by and take a look for yourself. There's just too many unique things to put in this video. And if you haven't done so yet, check out last month's video on the old Coeur d'Alene Hardware Company building, now home to the price tag and silver tea room. Also, be sure to visit us on Facebook. We have lots of old historic photographs of Wallace and the Silver Valley, and be sure to like our page. You can also email us at historicwallacepreservation@gmail.com.
That's all, folks.